Hello and welcome to this lecture, where we will finally get started with creating our terrain. Let's get right to it. Start Gaia and a new blank project. First of all, I recommend set the viewport to 1K right away. It makes it easier to see what we're working with, giving us more details in the viewport. Then we add our first node. We're going with a multifractal node. Either right click the graph and start typing, multi, or drag it out from the toolbox as such. Just going to delete it. I really like the multifractal node, and it is often my first node. It's a multi-noise node that can easily generate the basis for a realistic looking terrain. It does, however, require some experimentation with its settings. I also like to add an erosion node right away. Just drag from the output and start typing ER. Having the erosion applied makes it easier to envision the final result. Erosion gives everything a more realistic look. And pin this node so we can make changes to the multifractal node while the 3D viewport updates and includes the erosion node. Either right click and select pin or use the hotkey F. As you can see, it has a green mark indicating it is pinned. Now when you click on multifractal, the viewport doesn't change. The erosion is still applied. If I turn off the pin, click on multifractal, then we see the 3D viewport update without erosion. So back to pin, go to multifractal, and now we can start making changes. I start by trying different seeds. A seed is a number used to initialize random generators. It's just a matter of finding something that pleases your eye, something you like the look of. Quite like this one. We have a tall mountain feature here, and then we have something that almost looks like a canyon or a valley going through here and also here. But once we move on and we change settings, this landscape can alter dramatically. As we can see, the multifractal node default settings plus the erosion node actually creates quite decent results. But let's make a few changes. We will keep the noise type here at FBM. FBM stands for fractal Brownian motion. In nature, fractals are objects or processes that display self-similar patterns at different scales. So imagine a tree branch. At one scale, it can look like a smaller version of the entire tree. In FBM, this same self-similarity is applied to random movement. So by combining the concept of fractals and the randomness of Brownian motion, we get complex erratic patterns with a varying degree of roughness. So by changing the roughness setting, we can adjust how sharp or round features will be. So all the way to the right, pointy almost spears, and all the way to the extreme left, it's completely rounded. The only detail we have left is from the erosion process, which creates flows that looks like rivers or veins. So for our purposes, I think around 40% is fine. A feature size of 100% will probably work fine. We can see if we decrease this one, we get some more erratic features. There's a lot of artistic freedom and artistic choice working with procedural generation like this. Feel free to play with the large scale size setting as you want. If you increase it, you will reduce feature count and the landscape will look more flat. But if you go all the way to the left, it will be too chaotic as you have too many features. So somewhere around 50% and up tends to work fine. The large scale size setting is obviously scaling up the features. We can see this quite apparent if we move slowly. I often change one setting and then go back to playing with the seed as I find something I like. So now I can see no matter which seed I choose, the landscape is kind of flat and not too varied. So let's adjust the large scale size. Get some of our random details back. Let's try a seed again. This looks more akin to what I'm envisioning, what I want. You can also click the icon here to get random seeds, the infinite 8. If we imagine this terrain will be used for a game, we need to make sure we have space or room for some actual gameplay to take place. If it's a flight simulator, it won't make much of a difference if the landscape is a bit busy or steep, but if it's a third person or first person game where you will walk on foot here and perhaps there will be buildings involved as well or other structures, then we need to have some flat areas for these, so try to keep that in mind as you develop the landscape. Although we try to get as good of a result we can in Gaia, keep in mind that when we export our terrain to Unreal Engine, we can make changes to it inside the Unreal Engine editor, so what we see here won't be the final result. It's not like we are stuck with this. So the variation setting down here is like another seed. We can experiment with it and use combinations of seed and variation to get some interesting results. The variation setting will create taller mountains if you increase the value. All the way on the left, the features will be similar but lower. And in the middle, everything will start to flatten out. This doesn't look too bad. We have some open, almost flat areas here, where we could place out trees and perhaps a river. We always need to keep in mind how the landscape will be used, if it's suitable for a game. Almost looks like a small crater here. Increasing the smoothness setting will actually raise the landscape and make it look more rugged. In this case, more like a mountain range. And decreasing the setting can completely flatten the landscape. Like with most of these settings, it's about finding a middle ground. The damping setting here is also another way to smooth out or round the terrain. So increasing it, we can make sure our highest point is lowered. The features get less interesting the higher we get here in percentage. I will do a little bit of damping. Bias is another setting that affects height as well. At 100% it will stretch the peaks higher. And all the way left at negative 100% it will actually invert the terrain. Again, it's about the middle ground. And where is the middle ground, you say? Well, that is up to you. Artistic choice or personal preference. Then we have the warp settings and perturb. Now, of course, perturb means to disturb something, like for instance a water surface when you throw a rock at it. And in Gaia it sort of does the same thing, and we can adjust with how much force it does so. Let's select simple here. You see the landscape changes right away, but if you drag the warp strength down to the left, the landscape is unchanged. These settings are all for warp, and of course warp means to bend or twist, and we can see that is the manner in which these settings affect the landscape, with a bendy or twisty force. When you want to understand what the effect of certain settings are, it often helps to go with extreme settings right away, like setting warp size to max, and then playing with strength to see how it affects the terrain. At 0%, of course, nothing happens. You see that the terrain is deformed in a particular way. You get these ridges going across the landscape, tall ridges. So the effect can be quite interesting, but you have to use it at a moderate strength. I actually quite like this, so I will do another save here. Then I go back to playing with the seed. A lot of procedural generation is about happy accidents. What I'm looking for is a landscape that doesn't look too chaotic, but at the same time has interesting features. And in particular, I'm looking for a landscape that has plenty of open flat areas, but also interesting mountain features. I will increase warp strength to 20%. Attenuation reduces the force or amplitude of the warp strength. Increasing this setting will decrease how much our landscape is affected. The warp settings are good, so I try a few more seeds. For some reason I tend to find the lower numbers work better than the higher ones, so if I click down here on the left, I tend to get seeds alike. And if I click up here on the right side, which gives a higher seed number, I'm not too happy with the results. I actually found a seed number that will work well for this landscape when I was experimenting for the course off screen. I wasn't recording at the time, and that number is 19537. I think this landscape will work really well for us. It has some nice variation, and I can envision a river going here through this canyon or valley. It might not look like much right now, but when you add a couple more features like rivers, forests, and perhaps even a lake, it will really transform the landscape. We might also add what is called a hero mountain. A hero mountain looks good from all angles, and like the name says, it's kind of the focus point for the landscape. So feel free to keep experimenting with the settings if you want, but I will move on from here and start adding more nodes.